Okay, so today we are learning about synthetic division, which is basically when you are dividing two polynomials. So this is going to be just a very interesting process, something that's a little bit different, but I actually think you guys might like it the more that we do it. So the first thing that I want to notice is that I'm taking this polynomial, x squared plus 5x plus 1, divided by x plus 3. So this box here helps us set up our synthetic division. So first thing I want to notice is the first polynomial is degree 2. So what we're going to do at the top of this box is start with x squared and work our way down all the way to x to the 0. So x squared, x to the first, x to the 0. Okay, you always do that. And then underneath of these variables, I'm writing the coefficients from this polynomial. So here, my coefficient for x squared for this polynomial is 1. So I'm going to draw a 1 under here. My coefficient for x to the first power is this positive 5. And then technically, we never write it, but technically there's an x to the 0 right here. So my coefficient, again, would be this positive 1. Okay, so that's the first start of the setup. Now, we are looking at this binomial here, x plus 3. And I want to know what number would we plug in for x to make x plus 3 equal to 0? Well, if you solve for x, we get x is equal to negative 3, and that's the number that we're going to put over here. Okay, so that's the setup, and now we do the process. So process is you always start, I'm going to use a different color, always start by dropping down the first coefficient, so this 1. Okay, once I have a number under my line here, we multiply it to negative 3. Okay, so I'm going to take negative 3 times 1, which is negative 3, and then I'm going to write that negative 3 underneath my next coefficient. Okay, just like that. Then, when we have two numbers lined up like this, we add them. So I'm going to add 5 plus negative 3. Well, that's positive 2. Okay, and then from here, my process just starts over. So I'm taking negative 3, multiplying it to 2. Well, that's negative 6. So I write that under my next coefficient. And then from here, we are adding. So 1 plus negative 6 is negative 5. Okay, now here is how we write our answer. So this very last number here, negative 5, that is my remainder. And then just like how up here, we went x squared, x to the first, x to the 0. Well, we're going to do the same thing down here, but kind of go the opposite direction. So we start with x to the 0, go x to the first, and then if I had more numbers, I would go x squared, x cubed, and so on. Okay, but we don't have other numbers, so we don't need to do that. Oops. Let's just erase the 2. Okay, so these numbers here become the coefficients for these variables. Okay, so my coefficient for x to the first is 1, so I could write that as 1x to the first, but we never actually write it like that. We just write x. And then I have plus 2x to the 0, but remember x to the 0 is just 1, so we never write that. We just write 2. And then my remainder is minus 5, so this is going to be a little bit weird, but we're going to do minus 5 divided by, and then we divide by whatever binomial we divided by up here, so x plus 3. And that would be our answer. And then it says, is x plus 3 a factor of the polynomial? And we would say no, because we have a remainder of negative 5. So the only time that like this binomial would be a factor is if my remainder was 0, okay? So let's do number 2, okay? So we notice that this binomial starts with x cubed, so I'm gonna, along the top, do x cubed, x squared, x to the first, x to the 0, and then under these variables, I write the coefficients for each of the terms, okay? So my coefficient for x cubed is 2. My coefficient for x squared is -11. My coefficient for x is 9. And then my last term here for x to 0 is -20, okay? And then in this box, we're gonna put whatever number would make this binomial equal to 0. So in this case, we would put +5 because 5 minus 5 is 0. And then we do our process. So we always drop down our first coefficient. So I'm gonna drop down the 2. And then remember, once I have a number under the line, I multiply 5 times 2. Okay, so in that case is 10. Put it underneath the next coefficient, and then we're adding. -11 plus 10 is -1. And then again, I am multiplying to -1. 5 times -1 is -5. And then we're adding. 9 minus 5 is 4. 5 times 4 is 20. And then we're adding. -20 plus 20 is 0. So this time we have a remainder of 0, which we like. So remember, this is my remainder. And then we take our variables and go like the opposite way. So this is x to the 0, x to the first, and x squared. Okay, so how I would write my answer would be 2x squared minus x plus 4. Okay, and the last question says, is x minus 5 a factor of the polynomial? Yes, because we have no remainder. Which basically means it divides evenly into, so what this is saying is that x minus 5 divides evenly into this polynomial. Okay? Okay, number 3. This polynomial is degree 3, so let's start with x cubed, x squared, x to the first, x to the 0, and then I'm writing my coefficients underneath each of these variables. So this would be 2, 4, -3, -6. And then over here in my box, I'm making whatever number would make this binomial equal 0. So in this case, it would be -3. And then we start our process. So that's the setup. Now we're doing our process. So drop down the first coefficient. So there's a 2. And then I'm multiplying -3 times 2, which would be -6. And then we're adding these two numbers together, so that would be -2. And then again, I'm multiplying -3 times -2, which is +6. And then we're adding, so -3 plus 6 is 3. And then again, I'm multiplying -3 times 3, which is -9. And then we are adding, so that would be -15. Okay, again, this last number here, this is my remainder. And then this is my x to the 0 term, x to the first, and x squared. So again, these numbers here become the coefficients for these variables. So my answer here is 2x squared minus 2x plus 3, but I have a remainder of -15, so I have to do minus 15 divided by whatever binomial we divided by. So 15 divided by x plus 3, and that's our answer. Is this a factor? No, because we have a remainder of negative 15. Okay, number 4. So this polynomial is degree 3. Okay, so I'm going to start with x cubed. Work my way down. So x cubed, x squared, x to the first, x to the 0. And then I'm putting these coefficients underneath of the variables. So 2, negative 11, 13, negative 44. And then in my box right here, I'm putting whatever number would make this binomial equal to 0, so 5. And then we do our process. So drop down the coefficient, and then we're multiplying. Which normally I think I write that in black, so let's change that to black. Okay. 5 times 2 is 10, and then we're adding. Negative 11 plus 10 is negative 1, and then we are multiplying. 5 times negative 1 is negative 5, and then we are adding, so that would be 8. 5 times 8 is 40, and then we're adding, negative 4. So again, we have a remainder of negative 4. This is x to the 0, x to the first, x squared. So my answer is 2x squared minus x plus 8, and then my remainder is negative 4. So I'm going to do minus 4 divided by whatever binomial we divided by up here, so x minus 5. Again, no, this is not a factor. Of negative 4. Okay. Okay, so we're going to do the same thing for these last couple problems here. Okay, so number 5, this polynomial is degree 2, so I start with x squared, and then I'm writing the coefficients underneath, so 2, 3, negative 4, and then in my box, I'm putting whatever number would make this binomial equal to 0, so in this case 2, and then I'm going to do my process. So drop down the 2, and then I'm multiplying these numbers. 2 times 2 is 4, then we're adding. 3 plus 4 is 7, 2 times 7 is 14, and then we're adding 10. So still, this last number is my remainder, and then this is x to the 0 and x to the first. So my answer here would be 2x plus 7, and then I have a remainder of positive 10, so I'm going to do plus 10 divided by x minus 2. Okay, we're going to say not a factor because we have a remainder. Okay. All right, let's do number 6. So this is variable n, okay, which doesn't change anything. We just have to remember to write our answer with n's. This degree is 4, so I'm going to start with n to the 4th and work my way down. So n to the 4th, n cubed, n squared, n to the first, n to the 0. And then underneath here, I'm putting the coefficients for all of these numbers underneath. So my coefficient for n to the 4th is 1. Coefficient for n to the 5th is 5. Well, if you guys notice, I don't have an n squared term. So if we don't have that term, we have to put 0 here as my coefficient. You have to remember to put a placeholder here, because if you don't, this is not going to work. Okay, my coefficient for n to the first is negative 6, and my coefficient for n to the 0 is 3. And then the number that I put in my box over here is whatever would make this equal to 0. So this would be negative 3. Okay, and then I do my process. So I drop down the first coefficient, and then I'm multiplying. Negative 3 times 1 is negative 3, and then I'm adding. Negative 3 times 2 is negative 6, and then I'm adding. Negative 3 times negative 6 is 18, and then I'm adding. Negative 3 times 12 is negative 36, and then I'm adding. This is my remainder. And then this is x to the 0, x to the first, x squared, and x cubed this time. Okay, so how I would write my answer is 1x cubed, which we just write as x cubed, plus 2x squared, minus 6x, plus 12, and then I have a remainder, so negative 33, divided by whatever binomial. So I always do this. I always do x's instead of n's. These all should be n's. My bad. I always do this. N cubed, 2n squared, 6n, and then n plus 3. So these all should be n's as well. I always forget if we have a variable other than x. Okay, and then again we would say no, not a factor. Remember, it's only a factor if you get a remainder of 0. Okay, so this one says for 7 and 8, just don't forget to put placeholders, which we had to put a placeholder for number 6 as well. So we'll just keep that in mind as we do these next two problems. So this one right here is degree 3. So again, we only focus on this first polynomial. This is degree 3. So I do x cubed, x squared, x to the first, and x to the 0. Okay, well, my coefficient for x cubed is 1, so I'm going to put a 1 here. And then if you notice, we don't have an x squared term or an x term. So for x squared, I'm going to put 0. For x to the first, I'm going to put 0. But then my constant term here is negative 125. Okay. Then in my box, I'm going to put whatever number would make this 0. So I'm going to put a 5 here. And then we just do our process. So drop down the 1. And then we multiply. 5 times 1 is 5. And we're adding. 5 times 5 is 25. And then we're adding. 5 times 25 is 125. And then we're adding. So this time I do have a remainder of 0. And then this is my x to the 0, x to the first, and x squared term. So my answer would be x squared plus 5x plus 25. And we would say, yes, it is a factor because we have a remainder of 0. Okay, last example here. The degree of this polynomial is 4. So I start with x to the 4th. So I go x to the 4th, x cubed, x squared, x to the first, x to the 0. This one, again, we are going to have a placeholder. So my coefficient for x to the 4th is 5. I don't have an x cubed term, so this is where we're going to have to put 0. My coefficient for x squared is 2, and then negative 15 and positive 10. And then my number that would make this binomial 0 would be negative 2. So I'm going to put a negative 2 here. And then we do our process. So drop down the 5, and then we're multiplying. So that's negative 10, adding. Negative 2 times negative 10 is 20, and we're adding. Negative 2 times 22 is negative 44. And then we're adding, so that would be negative 59. And then I'm going to need my calculator here for negative 2 times negative 59. that would be positive 118, and then we're adding 10 times 118, which would be 128. So this is my remainder. This is x to the 0, x to the first, x squared, and x cubed. Okay, so our answer is kind of long here, but our answer is 5x cubed minus 10x squared plus 22x minus 59, and then my remainder is positive 128, so I'm going to do plus 128 divided by x plus